Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. And I specifically acknowledge the presence of our Governor General's deputy, the Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, the directors, management, and staff of ACB, and all of the other distinguished ladies and gentlemen present here this morning. As Ursula indicated, I have been a major advocate for investments, for people to invest in different instruments in order to increase their wealth. Unfortunately, that call has been demonized to some extent by those who ignorantly refer to it as illegal creative enrichment. But I'll come back to that issue later in my presentation. Let me state here categorically that it is certainly a pleasure to join you for the launch of the ACB Invest. And I congratulate the Antigua Commercial Bank, or ACB Caribbean, on the launch of this very important wealth management unit. This is not only a milestone for the bank, but for Antigua and Barbuda and its financial future. It is also more than simply a new service. This will form part of our nation's investment infrastructure, providing customers with investment alternatives beyond the traditional low-yield deposits. It will also accelerate and broaden wealth creation beyond a narrow elite to the broad center of our society. Wealth management is often misunderstood as a service reserved exclusively to assist the affluent in investment management, financial planning, estate planning, tax planning, and risk management to grow and preserve their wealth while generating passive income. In reality, it is about financial empowerment, helping ordinary citizens to make smart decisions to protect and invest what they earn, thereby creating wealth and financial security, economic resilience, and intergenerational prosperity. And I'm also a major proponent for intergenerational prosperity. We should not be living for ourselves and literally leave a legacy in which future generations have to roll up their sleeves, when we can indeed create intergenerational wealth to make sure that future generations are prosperous. The investments also assist in fueling economic growth, job creation, increasing innovation and competitiveness, as well as financial mobility. In Antigua and Barbuda, we are already demonstrating that wealth creation can be inclusive, intentional, and certainly transformational. And this happens when the government, financial institutions, and citizens work together. So we need buy-in to this initiative in which we're seeking to preside over a wealthy nation. Because at the end of the day, you cannot have a successful country that is built exclusively on poor people. Evidently, you need wealthy people, you need the middle class, you need the wealthy in order to drive economic growth and development. Now, a society that invests wisely builds confidence, opportunity, and shared progress, ensuring that growth and development are not accidental, but intentional and sustaining. And that is precisely why we're gathered here today, to help to strengthen, to broaden the investment infrastructure, to ensure that future development is not accidental, but intentional and sustaining. Now, as I said before, I've been one of the leading protagonists for wealth creation in our country. And I've called upon our people consistently to invest, to utilize their resources, their skills, their creativity, their innovativeness, and networking to generate wealth. Unfortunately, there are some, maybe I should call them obscurantists in our society who have ignorantly, and I emphasize ignorantly, characterize this enlightened call as criminal creative enrichment in an attempt to stymie progress. And I just want to say to our people that we need to frown against that kind of characterization, because what they're doing here is to promote ignorance and at the same time undermining growth and development within the country. Now, we see our government as an enabler and certainly a participant in wealth creation. We do not subscribe to the traditional model that government's role is exclusively about regulations. As far as we're concerned, in a small society with limited resources, the government itself has to be involved in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. The government must also invest, and especially in conjunction or in partnership with the private sector. Now, in 2015, my government eliminated personal income tax as a wealth creation strategy. And the thinking behind it is that when you tax income, especially personal income, it serves as a disincentive. And we took the position that by eliminating personal income tax, disposable incomes will increase, savings will increase, and with increased savings, then our people will be better empowered to invest. So the policy has worked, and we have seen an increase in disposable income, savings, and investments during the last 11 and a half years. Our government believes that state capitalism is important, especially in microstates with small populations and limited resources, as I said before. Our administration has been both entrepreneurial and entrepreneurial, pursuing our deliberate economic model of empowerment capitalism. And just to explain what empowerment capitalism is all about, it's literally our homegrown economic model, which in essence is a partnership, or let's say a private-public partnership for profits, not the usual private-public partnership to outsource wealth to a small cadre of individuals, but one in which the government is actually taking an equity stake in partnership with the private sector to generate profits. And this model is especially important, recognizing that our private sector entities are generally small, and some large investments are beyond their means. But if you have this partnership with the government and the private sector, investments that ordinarily would have been beyond the capacity of a single entity, private sector entity, or a group of private sector entities, then become possible. So we are literally crowding in investments by participating in the investment space. Now, this model has worked, and we have seen significant returns in profits, dividends, and taxes from the various businesses in which our government has an equity stake, to include WEOC, ECAB, Caribbean Union Bank, State Insurance Corporation, and Jolly Beach. In fact, Jolly Beach has been profitable for the last two years, and this year it's projecting a profit in the region of about $5 million. And I'll add here too that we intend to continue to corporatize various entities and certainly to list them, entities in which the government has a stakeholding, in order to broaden ownership at the micro individual level. Now, over the past decade, our policies have deliberately focused on turning income into assets and participation into ownership. And we believe strongly that ownership is empowerment. You can't be empowered if you do not own assets. Now, my administration is building a stakeholder society by expanding domestic, individual, corporate, and government ownership to ensure that Antigua and Barbuda, or Antiguan and Barbudans, Antiguans and Barbudans control the commanding heights of our country's economy. And again, the reason why we are also pursuing, that is the government of Antigua and Barbuda, direct investments, is to literally play our part in ensuring that entities, or let's say investments for that matter, that ordinarily would have been controlled by foreign direct investments, that the government can partner with the private sector in order to control the ownership locally. And we have seen this, for example, with the domestic banks, where we would have forced the international banks to sell their local branches to the domestic banks. And the method and the mandate there was to ensure that we broaden domestic ownership, because we recognize by so doing, we're not only making these local banks stronger and obviously more viable for corresponding banking, but we also created opportunity for increased profits, increased dividends to the various shareholders, and increased taxes for our government. And that is precisely what has happened during the last several years. Between ECAB and ACB, we have benefited from increased taxes, and certainly the stakeholders include the shareholders. They have seen a significant increase in their dividend payments. So again, I put it to you that the model is working. My administration is determining that our country's economy will not be an extractive economy where the majority of the profits are repatriated to fuel development in other countries. And that is what happened during colonialism and slavery. in which the profits that were generated, not only here in Antigua and Barbuda, but throughout the Caribbean region, those profits were repatriated to North America and to Europe to build their economies, to build their universities, their hospitals, their various institutions, while our countries were left bereft of the resources to grow and develop our country and their peoples, our countries and their peoples. So again, what we are seeking to do here is to develop our own model and to ensure that the model works for our development. I recognize that globally now, many developed countries are taking the position that they do not want any poor people in their country. So it means that we have to do whatever is necessary in order to grow and develop our country, and certainly to make sure people become wealthy, so that wherever visas are granted, that they will not see us as a potential risk as individuals who will be a charge on the resources, and that they will feel comfortable to extend access to our country based on the fact that our people would be wealthy compared to others. And when we look at the growth in the per capita income, for example, during the last decade, it has moved from about 14,000 US per head to about 22,000 US per capita. So we are making significant progress, and we have to continue to build on that progress. There's no reason, for example, why within the next decade that we cannot enjoy a per capita income of maybe 30 to 35,000 US dollars per head. And that will open up opportunities for us, social and economic opportunities for us. Now, I want to give you a little performance overview of our country's economy for you to determine whether or not our bespoke economic model is working, and also the policy initiatives, including the elimination of personal income tax, if they're working to your benefit. And I leave you to be the judge. Our administration has had 1 year of economic contraction, evidently during COVID, an event over which we had no control, and practically all countries globally experienced economic contraction. Now, during the past several years, Antigua and Barbuda has recorded strong and resilient economic performance. Despite the myriad global challenges and the devastations brought by the polycrisis, to include COVID, Hurricane Irma, and the war in Ukraine, our country's fiscal and economic fundamentals remain sound, with primary and overall surpluses. And we noticed too that within the banking sector that the NPLs have actually fallen significantly, even below the international standard of 5% or benchmark of 5%. I'm also pleased to report too that our debt to GDP has fallen from 104% a decade ago down to 61% today. Inflation is now below 3%, and our economy has grown at an average annual rate of about 6% during the last 5 years. This growth has been largely investment-led, and in particular, driven by a sustained expansion in the tourism sector. Foreign direct investment has played an essential role in this story. Now, between 2017 and 2024, net foreign direct investment inflows average about 12.5% of GDP, peaking at about 18% in 2021. These inflows, which average more than $750 million annually since 2021, have financed large-scale hotel resorts and mixed-use developments. These have transformed our physical landscape and expanded productive capacity across our country's economy. The $750 million annually in foreign direct investment represents multiples of the foreign investments attracted by previous administrations. Now, the construction sector in particular has been one of the most significant beneficiaries of this investment momentum. From major hospitality developments to residential housing and commercial projects, construction activity is booming to the extent that we now have a shortage of labor. In fact, we have now been importing labor from the Dominican Republic. In 2025 alone, the estimated value of residential construction increased by 25% over the prior year, while the value of commercial construction surged to over $400 million in a single year. So the economy is hot. Data on hardware sales, construction material, and construction companies all point to a sustained upward trend over the last decade, confirming that investment activity is translating into real economic output and employment. Now, the pipeline remains strong for the next several years, and we can see Antigua and Barbuda sustaining a growth rate between 5 and 6% per annum because of the amount of investments that we have that will commence within the ensuing years. Confirmed hotel and resort projects represent several $billion in planned investments over the coming years, with over $370 million, that's US dollars, projected to be spent in 2026. That's $1 billion EC dollars to be spent this year. Now, these projects will generate thousands of jobs, deepen linkages with local suppliers, and further strengthen Antigua and Barbuda's position as a premier marquee tourism destination. And I should add here too that just last year, within the last year, we have seen an increase of about 4,000 jobs. And what is also exciting about it too is that they range between $10,000 and $15,000 per month salaries or wages, or salaries for that matter, would have increased significantly. We would have had a few thousand individuals who are now in that bracket. So we actually seen the uplifting of our people in which they're earning more. Now, importantly, the construction boom is not limited to tourism. And I would like to speak here briefly about the issue of empowerment through home, land, and car ownership. Again, asset ownership. Ownership is empowerment, as I said before. Significant progress has also been made in housing and urban renewal, reinforcing the linkage between economic growth and social development. Over the past decade, more than 3,000 parcels of land were made available at heavily subsidized price, and approximately 2,000 homes were constructed through National Housing and Chapel. Now, I will explain why we are subsidizing car ownership, land ownership, and home ownership. Subsidized housing developments across North Sound, Bowlands, Lightfoot, Glanvilles, Villa, Painters, Denfields, and other communities have expanded access to affordable housing, thereby increasing the net worth of thousands of individuals. So we're not only subsidizing these properties in order to make them affordable, but at the same time, we're transferring wealth to these individuals. In fact, one of the things that we observed in 2014 when we first took over the governance of the country, Antigua and Barbuda had one of the highest Gini coefficients in the world. And that in itself had to be addressed. It meant that the distribution of wealth was extremely skewed. So this policy of transferring wealth to individuals is very important in terms of ensuring that there's more equitable development within the country. In 2026, 150 climate-resilient condominium homes will be distributed to the former Booby Alley residents, and a further 150 middle-income homes will be constructed. So this year alone, we expect to produce at least 300 homes. And again, we always believe that a society is known on how it treats its most vulnerable. So we're making sure that we do not leave the vulnerable behind. And to that extent, we're not only assisting with low-income housing, but we're also providing free homes for the poor and indigent. We have what is called the HAPPY program, and that is home advancement for the poor and indigent, in which this year we will provide at least 50 free homes for the poor and indigent. In addition, a few hundred residential parcels of land will be made available in 2026 at a subsidized price. Now, these will further stimulate construction, deepen domestic investment, and improve the quality of life for Antiguans and Barbudans. And I want to state here too, and this particular initiative is very important for those of you who wish to invest in Airbnb properties. Commencing next week, 55 lots will be made available to locals at Shell Beach, specifically to construct Airbnb investment properties. Our government will also extend tax and duty-free waivers on the building material, fixtures, and fittings to construct these properties. And I'm urging you to please seize the opportunity to get a beautiful parcel of land either on the beach or close to the beach in order to build your investment property. Because within the last few years, we noticed that the amount of tourists who are accommodated in Airbnb properties have increased. In fact, Airbnb properties now host about 35% of all the tourists who come to Ireland. And we would like to see that increase because this is one of the ways in which we're ensuring that locals could participate in the tourism sector. They may not have the resources to build out a large resort, but building an Airbnb property, a modest property, may be costing $500,000 with a nice little pool, even if it's a plunge pool at a nice site. Those are the kind of opportunities that we are creating for people. That is why, for example, we made Pensioners Beach available, and we are consistently developing additional sites, middle-income and high-income sites, so that our people can purchase these lots at a subsidized rate and to build out their investment properties. Now, by the second quarter of this year, Barbudans will benefit from freehold title for up to 1 acre of land for a grand sum of $1. I repeat, $1. Again, this is what you call empowerment, transferring wealth to our people. So each Barbudan who benefits from up to 1 acre of land for $1 will automatically see an increase in their wealth by a few $100,000. This is true empowerment. Our administration has subsidized at least 5,000 homes during the past 10 years with duty and tax waivers on building material, fixtures, and fittings for home construction. And I hope you're following the thinking here. What we're doing here as a government is to institute policies to build wealth. So in as much as we are encouraging the private sector to do it on their own, our government is actually instituting policies and programs to help our people to increase their wealth. Now, in addition, we have granted duties and tax waivers on the purchase of over 30,000 vehicles during the last 10 years. In fact, practically every vehicle that comes into this country gets some form of duty or tax waiver. Again, a deliberate policy. So this is not merely a duty-free policy. It's not a policy for votes. It is actually a wealth creation policy in practice. So we're not only speaking it, we're doing it. And in essence, we know that the government could be wealthier, but what's the point of having an extremely wealthy government and a large cadre of poor people? What we're doing here is that we're lifting our people. We're giving the opportunity to increase their ownership, to increase their wealth, to make sure that they can improve their living standards, and at the same time, to ensure that we transfer wealth to them, which they in turn could transfer to future generations. Now, in 2025 alone, our government approved duty and tax waivers on 121 homes for first-time homeowners, with an average home value of about $342,000. Each of these homes represents a family with equity, a pathway to intergenerational wealth, and a more stable and confident middle class. So we're having an expanded middle class in this country, and again, by design, not by accident. This is government acting as a catalyst, not a substitute for the market. So this does not negate the need for the investment product that ACB is actually creating now. I think this is very important in order to ensure that there is greater wealth creation within our society. I'd like to speak briefly too about business ownership. So not just about land ownership, car ownership, and home ownership. We understand that business ownership is also very important. We want to make sure that our businesses are controlled, majority controlled by Antiguans and Barbudans. We recognize that we will always need foreign direct investments. All countries compete for foreign direct investments. But at the same time, we must become, let's say, in full control of our country's development, and to make sure that the profits, at least the majority of the profits that are generated, that those profits are retained within our country's economy. So our commitment to wealth creation extends beyond housing, land, and car ownership. Entrepreneurship is at the cornerstone of our wealth creation policy. Through the Investment Facilitation Unit and the Prime Minister's Entrepreneurial Development Program, the EDP, we have focused on broadening access to finance and opportunity, particularly for underserved groups. These programs deliver low-cost concessionary financing between 1% to 3%, blended loans and grant equity partnerships. The grant component is designed to de-risk investments, and it also includes a business training advisory service and institutional support to help entrepreneurs, not just to start businesses, but also to grow and sustain them. We've also created the opportunity for locals to invest in government bond instruments, and will continue to divest our shares, as I said before, in profitable state-owned corporations. We've done so in the case of WEOC. We hope to do so with State Insurance Corporation. And as you may be aware, we also own shares in ECAB, 25% shares, and we also have preference shares, which we hope to convert into equity shares, and then to have ECAB listed on the Eastern Caribbean Stock Exchange, so that ordinary Antiguans and Barbudans can buy shares in the bank, which is now one of the most profitable enterprises on the island. And I want to make a plea to the directors and shareholders of ECAB. You have been frustrating this policy initiative of our government, in which we are seeking to convert the preference shares into ordinary shares, so that we can in turn divest them to Antiguans and Barbudans. So, to whom this applies, please do something about it. We're trying to avoid any form of confrontation on this issue, but it is going now on about 8 years since we've been trying to effect this transaction, and your excuses are now stale and totally unacceptable. So my word to you is to do something about it. Now, the result of our policies is a growing pipeline of financially literate, investment-ready citizens, exactly the foundation required for modern wealth management ecosystem. So I believe that we have one of the best wealth management ecosystems in place, and with ACB instituting this investment program, this wealth management initiative, then evidently the ecosystem will be further broadened, giving Antigua and Barbuda a competitive edge compared to other countries within the region. And let me make it abundantly clear that we must be architects of our own development. Gone are the days when we continue to rely almost exclusively on foreigners to dictate and to determine let's say, the progress in this country. I mean, our people have to show greater interest in investing and to literally control the ownership and to direct the advancement of our country. So while we welcome and value foreign investment, we must also be clear about the next phase of our development. We are actually now entering into a new phase, which requires your collective participation, or collective and individual participation. Now, the future of sustainable inclusive growth requires greater local participation in investment and wealth creation. It is quintessential that we have more of our people participating in this space. Our citizens and residents have the capacity and must become the architects of our own development, not to rely on people external of Antigua and Barbuda for validation or to lead the development of this country. Now, there's more than $5 billion in domestic deposits, 50% of which represents private savings deposits. Annual growth in savings now exceed $250 million. And evidently, this is also fueled by the absence of PIT, because if there is personal income tax, disposable incomes would have reduced, and your savings clearly would not have been as much as 250 million. So again, I'm showing how that policy is working. Now, these savings represent untapped potential, capital that can be mobilized into productive investments, diversified portfolios, and long-term wealth-building opportunities for Antiguans and Barbudans. This is why today's launch is so important, to provide more lucrative investment options to accelerate wealth creation, domestic-driven growth, and development. A strong, well-regulated wealth management and investment initiative would help to bridge the gap between savings and investments. You want to see more of those savings converted into investments to get better yields, better returns. It would empower individuals, families, and businesses to participate more directly in national development, whether through capital markets, structured investment products, real estate, or enterprise financing. And based on the ecosystem that we have developed, and we are now expanding the investment infrastructure ecosystem that we have developed and is now expanding here in Antigua and Barbuda, we see Antigua and Barbuda becoming a significant wealth management destination within the region. So with stable governance, progressive investment policies, and a growing middle class, Antigua and Barbuda is well positioned as a regional wealth management destination. Our value proposition is clear. Local citizens building wealth through home ownership, land ownership, share ownership, entrepreneurship, and disciplined financial planning. Regional international investors seeking diversification, tourism, real estate, and emerging productive sectors. And a jurisdiction that combines quality of life, policy stability, and opportunity. Now, the establishment of ACB's Wealth Management Unit is timely, and it is certainly strategic, complementing our government's work by providing professional financial planning, investment advisory services, and disciplined portfolio management. We trust that other domestic financial institutions will follow ACB's lead. So ACB is clearly the pioneer here, and ACB has been a very, let's say, a long-standing pioneer financial institution in this country, and we are calling upon other institutions, including ECAB, to follow ACB's lead. Together, government and financial institutions can expand financial literacy, making wealth management accessible to all citizens, not just a few. Again, we're looking for broad ownership and to ensure that we empower people with wealth. It would also ensure leverage blended financing models that combine government support with private capital and financial sector expertise, as well as channeling capital into high growth sectors, to include real estate, tourism, agriculture, and enterprise development. And as I speak about the issue of investments in agriculture, I want to remind all of us about our food insecurity. and the fact that we need more investments in agriculture. I'm of the view that notwithstanding the fact that we have certain disadvantages in terms of low rainfall and other structural problems in terms of economies of scale and so on, that it's still a lucrative sector in which we are inviting our people to invest. We have incentivized this sector with lots of subsidies, even concessions, including tax concessions. Farmers do not pay any taxes, so if you involve in this space, whatever profit you make obviously will be net profit because there are no government taxes. But what is required in this sector is more private sector investment. There are many people who speak glibly about the government doing more for agriculture. Well, when it comes to subsidies, I'm of the view that barring subsidies in developed countries and maybe large developing countries like China, the subsidies that we provide to our farmers are perhaps even more competitive than in other countries. But what is clearly lacking is private sector investment. And I want to encourage those of you who have resources to partner with our farmers and to help them to increase their production so that we can become more food secured. This is easily the most vulnerable aspect of our development. And when you look at the current geopolitical situation here in this hemisphere and even globally, clearly we're going through a period of instability, and the reliability that we would have had previously in allies, clearly that reliability does not exist. And any form of hemispheric instability created by conflict, by wars, could obviously place us in a very invidious position. I've said publicly that if the food boats do not come here for about 3 weeks, we'll practically starve. And that is a serious vulnerability. But again, when they say that government must increase agriculture, it's not governments that do farming. Individuals do farming. Individuals invest in farming. Our role here is primarily to provide the infrastructural development, which we're doing. In fact, we're investing heavily now in expanding food production from the standpoint of building out dams and clearing land and so on. We're also establishing an abattoir, well, 2 abattoirs rather. So we're expanding the infrastructure, but we require private investments in that sector. And I'm taking the time out to appeal to those of you here and those who obviously are literally watching or listening to the various platforms to please invest in this critical sector so that we can become less vulnerable. And obviously we'll position Antigua and Barbuda as a Caribbean model for inclusive, innovative wealth management. So again, I want to commend ACB heavily for this initiative. And as I wind down my presentation, I want to make a call to action. I therefore urge citizens to embrace financial planning, savings, and investment literacy as essential life skills. You know, ignorance in the 21st century cannot build wealth. People need to make themselves available to learn the necessary skills to invest, certainly to save, the discipline to save, and certainly the skills to invest in order to build wealth. And financial institutions, including ACB, they should continue to partner deeply with our various government programs to broaden access and impact. Even in terms of agriculture, recognizing our vulnerability, there's no reason why ACB and other banks cannot make a small portion of risk capital, even if it's a small portion of your net profit, to fund that sector, because again, capital is needed. And again, we're not trying to give away money. All we're saying here is that more capital is needed in that sector, and certainly the financial institutions have a significant role to play in that regard. Now, investors, local, regional, international, they should see Antigua and Barbuda not just as a place to invest, but as a place to grow wealth and to do so responsibly and sustainably. In conclusion, when government's policy and financial expertise move in alignment, every dollar invested in a home, business, or portfolio can translate into stronger families, thriving communities, and a more resilient and inclusive economy. That is the Antigua and Barbuda we are building, an economic powerhouse, as I've said before. And by the way, we do have an economic powerhouse in the making. And I would have added within recent times that we're also building a lifestyle superpower. As we get wealthier, clearly, when you look at the fact too that crime and violence is relatively low compared to other Caribbean countries, and the fact too that we are instituting initiatives to even drive it down further, and are people able to earn good incomes, then evidently Antigua and Barbuda will become one of the best places on earth to live. And that is why I said that we are building a lifestyle superpower. We don't have the resources to become, not a desire for that matter, even if we had the resources to become a military superpower, but we can become a lifestyle superpower to make sure that the living standards here are second to none. And I think that we have the natural environment so to do. What is lacking is the wealth, the individual wealth. And we are working assiduously to make sure that we increase the wealth of our people. And again, we welcome this initiative by ACB, in which they are also expanding the investment infrastructure for wealth creation. So we are strategically creating wealth for today, security for tomorrow, and prosperity for generations to come. And let us never forget future generations. We should not just live for ourselves, but we should also provide for future generations. Once again, I congratulate ACB Caribbean on this milestone, and I encourage all Antiguans and Barbadians to view this wealth management unit as an opportunity for wealth creation, an opportunity to convert savings into investment, investment into growth, and growth into shared prosperity. I thank you.